Lisa Chen had always prided herself on being logical. At 28, she worked as a data analyst for a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Portland, spending her days making sense of patterns and numbers that told stories about human behavior. Her apartment was organized with the same methodical precision she brought to her work, books arranged by subject, bills paid exactly on time, and her phone always charged and within arm's reach. She lived a predictable life, and she liked it that way. Predictability meant control, and control meant safety. That sense of safety began to crumble on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in March when her phone rang with the familiar buzz of an incoming call. She was stirring pasta sauce in her small galley kitchen, mentally planning her evening routine of Netflix and early bedtime, when she glanced at the caller ID and felt her world shift beneath her feet. The number displayed on her screen was her own. Lisa stared at the phone for a moment, certain she was seeing things wrong. The rain drummed against her apartment windows, creating a rhythm that suddenly felt ominous rather than soothing. She blinked hard and looked again. There it was, clear as day, her own phone number calling her own phone. The impossibility of it made her laugh nervously, a sound that seemed too loud in her quiet kitchen. This has to be some kind of mistake, she murmured to herself, but curiosity won over caution. She swiped to answer the call, holding the phone to her ear with the same tentative care she might use to approach a wild animal. "Hello," she said, her voice uncertain. What she heard on the other end of the line made every hair on her arm stand up. It was her own voice, speaking with perfect clarity and familiar inflection, but saying words she had never spoken. "Yes, I understand completely," her voice was saying to someone else, someone Lisa couldn't hear. "The appointment on Thursday at 2:30 p.m. works perfectly. Dr. Martinez's office, right? I'll make sure to bring all my insurance information and arrive 15 minutes early." Lisa's hand began to tremble. She hadn't made any doctor's appointment. She didn't know any Dr. Martinez. Her last medical checkup had been 6 months ago with Dr. Peterson, her regular physician, and she wasn't due for another visit until September. "Who is this?" she whispered into the phone, but her own voice continued the conversation as if she hadn't spoken at all. "Oh, and thank you for letting me know about the construction on 5th Street. I would have been so late if I'd taken my usual route. I'll definitely go around through the Park District instead." The line went dead, leaving Lisa standing in her kitchen with the phone pressed against her ear, listening to the hollow silence that follows the end of a call. Her pasta sauce was beginning to bubble over, filling the air with the sharp smell of burning tomatoes, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she'd just heard. Construction on 5th Street? She drove down 5th Street every day on her way to work, and there had been no construction that morning. No orange cones, no detour signs, no workers in hard hats directing traffic around obstacles. The street had been as clear and familiar as always. Lisa turned off the burner and set down her wooden spoon with shaking hands. She opened her phone's call log and scrolled through the recent entries. There it was, an incoming call from her own number, lasting exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. The timestamp showed 6:43 p.m., just moments ago. She took a screenshot of the call log, though she wasn't sure why. Some instinct told her she would need proof of what was happening, even if she couldn't yet understand what that might be. The screenshot felt inadequate, a poor substitute for the visceral reality of hearing her own voice discuss events that hadn't happened. That night, Lisa barely slept. She kept her phone on the nightstand beside her bed, volume turned up, waiting for another call that never came. Every small noise from the street below made her heart race. Every creak of the building settling made her wonder if someone was watching her, listening to her, somehow recording her voice and playing it back in impossible ways. The next morning, Lisa drove to work through her usual route down 5th Street, paying closer attention than she ever had before. Everything looked normal, the same coffee shop on the corner, the same bus stop where elderly Mr. Peterson waited for the number 19 bus every morning at 7:45, the same crosswalk where joggers waited for the light to change. No construction. No detours. No reason for anyone to suggest an alternate route. But at 10:30 a.m., Just as Lisa was settling into her morning analysis of customer demographic data, her supervisor Janet knocked on her cubicle wall. "Lisa, I need to let you know about some street maintenance starting tomorrow," Janet said, consulting a memo in her hand. "They're going to be repaving 5th Street between Oak and Maple for the rest of the week. You might want to find an alternate route to avoid the delays." The memo fluttered from Lisa's suddenly nerveless fingers. 5th Street between Oak and Maple was exactly the stretch she drove every morning. The construction that her own voice had warned her about on the phone call was real. It was happening. But how could she have known about it a day before anyone else did? "Are you okay?" Janet asked, her forehead creasing with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Lisa forced a smile that felt like wearing a mask. "I'm fine. Just tired. Thank you for letting me know about the construction." As Janet walked away, Lisa picked up the memo with trembling hands and read every word twice. The construction was scheduled to begin Thursday morning and continue through the following week. Emergency road repairs due to water main damage, according to the city's maintenance department. The same construction her own voice had somehow known about 24 hours before the official announcement. The rest of Wednesday passed in a blur of anxiety and hypervigilance. Lisa found herself checking her phone obsessively, jumping every time it buzzed with a text message or email notification. She researched phone spoofing online, reading articles about how scammers could manipulate caller ID to make it appear that calls were coming from different numbers. But none of the articles explained how someone could make it seem like a phone was calling itself, and certainly none of them explained how such a call could contain accurate predictions about future events. Thursday morning, Lisa took the detour through the park district that her voice had mentioned on the phantom call. Sure enough, 5th Street was blocked off with orange cones and construction equipment, just as the memo had warned. The coincidence felt like a weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe normally. At 2:30 p.m., while Lisa was in the middle of a quarterly report review, her phone rang again. Her own number. Her own voice. Her own impossible conversation with an unseen person on the other end of the line. "I'm so sorry to hear about your grandmother," her voice was saying with genuine sympathy. "I know how close you two are. The funeral is set for Saturday morning at 10 a.m. at St. Mary's Catholic Church on Elm Street. I'll definitely be there to pay my respects." Lisa's blood turned to ice. Both of her grandmothers had been dead for years. Her paternal grandmother, Nai, had passed away when Lisa was in college, and her maternal grandmother had died when Lisa was still in high school. There was no grandmother to lose, no funeral to attend, no St. Mary's Catholic Church in her life. But even as she tried to rationalize the call away, a terrible certainty was growing in her chest. The construction on 5th Street had been real. The appointment with Dr. Martinez, she suddenly remembered that she had been meaning to find a new dermatologist, and Martinez was a common name. What if there really was a Dr. Martinez? What if she really would need that appointment? The rest of the conversation continued with her voice discussing funeral arrangements and offering condolences to someone whose grief she could hear in their muffled responses. When the call ended, Lisa sat in her cubicle staring at her phone screen, feeling as if the ground beneath her chair was slowly dissolving. She spent her lunch break frantically calling her parents. Her father answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cheerful and familiar. "Lisa, what a nice surprise. How's work going? Dad, how's Mom? How are you feeling? Is everyone healthy?" The words tumbled out of her in a rush. "We're both fine, sweetie. Your mother is out in the garden trying to get the early tomatoes started. Is everything okay? You sound stressed." Lisa closed her eyes, feeling a momentary wave of relief. "I'm fine. Just wanted to check in. You'd tell me if anything was wrong, right? If anyone in the family was sick or..." "Of course I would." "Lisa, what's going on? You're worrying me." She wanted to tell him about the phone calls, about hearing her own voice predict things that then came true, about the growing sense that her reality was being manipulated by forces she couldn't understand. Instead, she forced her voice to sound casual and normal. "Nothing's wrong. just miss you both. Give Mom my love, okay? I will. And Lisa? Call us more often. We love hearing from you. After she hung up, Lisa felt marginally better. Her parents were fine. There was no dying grandmother, no funeral to attend. The phone call had been wrong this time. Maybe the construction thing had just been a coincidence. Maybe she was letting stress and anxiety create connections that didn't really exist. But Friday morning brought a call from her Aunt Sarah, her father's sister, whom Lisa hadn't spoken to in months. Lisa, honey, I have some sad news. Sarah's voice was thick with tears. Your great-grandmother Chen passed away last night in her sleep. I know you probably don't remember her very well. You were so young when we visited her in San Francisco, but she always asked about you. The funeral is set for Saturday morning at 10 a.m. at St. Mary's Catholic Church on Elm Street. The phone slipped from Lisa's nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor of her kitchen. Her great-grandmother, her father, spotted her from across the room and made his way over, his face brightening despite the somber occasion. Lisa, I didn't know you were planning to come. This means so much to the family. I felt like I should be here, she said, which was true, even if the reasons were more complicated than her father could possibly understand. During the service, as the priest spoke about the long life of a woman who had immigrated from China with nothing but hope and determination, Lisa felt a strange sense of disconnection from her own body. She was there, she was present, she was grieving for a woman she had barely known, but part of her felt like she was watching herself from outside, like she was an actor playing a role that had been written for her by someone else. The phone calls continued throughout the following weeks, each one more unsettling than the last. Her voice told her about a job interview she would have the following Thursday, and sure enough, her supervisor called on Wednesday to tell her about an unexpected opening in the company's Seattle office. Her voice mentioned a fender bender she would have in the parking lot of the grocery store on Pine Street, and on Saturday afternoon, while Lisa was loading groceries into her car, a distracted teenager backed into her bumper, causing exactly the minor damage her voice had described. Each prediction that came true felt like another thread being pulled from the fabric of her free will. Lisa began to feel like she was living someone else's life, following a script that had been written without her knowledge or consent. She started avoiding the situations her voice mentioned, taking different routes to work, skipping appointments, staying home instead of going out with friends. But somehow, the predictions always came true anyway. If her voice said she would be at a particular coffee shop on Tuesday morning, she would find herself there despite her best efforts to stay away, drawn by a sudden craving for their signature latte or a last-minute change in her routine that felt natural and unforced in the moment but inevitable in hindsight. The psychological toll was enormous. Lisa, who had always prided herself on being rational and in control, began to question everything about her own mind and agency. Was she somehow unconsciously orchestrating these events to match the predictions? Was she having some kind of breakdown that was causing her to forget making appointments and plans? The uncertainty was almost worse than the supernatural explanations she sometimes considered. She started seeing Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a therapist who specialized in anxiety and stress disorders. Dr. Rodriguez was a calm, professional woman in her 40s who listened to Lisa's story with the kind of neutral attention that felt both comforting and frustrating. These experiences you're describing sound very distressing, Dr. Rodriguez said during their third session. Have you considered that you might be experiencing some form of dissociative episodes? Sometimes when we're under extreme stress, our minds can create gaps in memory that feel like predictions coming true. Lisa wanted to believe. The violations this implied were staggering. Lisa felt sick thinking about invisible watchers studying her family's private pain, turning her great-grandmother's death into a data point in their psychological manipulation. But why, she asked. Why would someone go to all this trouble? What do they want from me? Mike shook his head. That's the question that worries me most. This level of sophisticated harassment usually has a specific goal. Someone wants something from you, or they want to control your behavior in some particular way. Have you noticed any changes in your daily routine? Any decisions you've made differently because of these calls? Lisa thought about all the ways the phone calls had altered her behavior. She had become more isolated, canceling social plans and avoiding situations her voice had mentioned. She had become paranoid and anxious, second-guessing every decision and constantly monitoring her phone for the next impossible call. She had started seeing a therapist and had sought out technical help, bringing new people into her life who had access to her personal information. "I don't know," she said finally. "I feel like I'm not making my own decisions anymore. Like someone else is writing the script for my life." "That might be exactly what they want," Mike said quietly. "Some psychological harassment campaigns are designed to make the target feel helpless and dependent. If someone can convince you that they know your future better than you do, they can start controlling your present." The investigation Mike conducted over the following weeks revealed the scope of the digital intrusion Lisa had suffered. Her email accounts had been compromised for at least 6 months. Her social media profiles had been scraped for personal information. Her phone's location services had been sending data to an unknown third party. Even her credit card and banking information had been accessed, allowing someone to track her spending patterns and daily routines. "Whoever is doing this is highly sophisticated," Mike explained as he showed Lisa the evidence of the digital invasion. "They're using military-grade hacking tools and have been planning this campaign for a long time. This isn't a random attack or a crime of opportunity. Someone has targeted you specifically. But I don't understand why. I'm nobody special. I don't have money or secrets or anything worth stealing." Mike looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. Sometimes the target isn't chosen because of what they have, but because of what they represent. You live alone, you have a predictable routine, you're socially isolated enough that people might not notice changes in your behavior right away. You're what we call a perfect victim for this kind of psychological experiment. The word experiment sent chills down Lisa's spine. The idea that her terror and confusion had been someone's research project, that her psychological breakdown had been carefully orchestrated and studied, made her feel like a laboratory animal rather than a human being. Working with Mike, Lisa began the slow process of reclaiming her digital life. They changed all her passwords, installed new security software, and created new email accounts with advanced encryption. They reported the harassment to both local police and federal cybercrime authorities, though Mike warned her that prosecuting sophisticated digital stalking cases was notoriously difficult. The hardest part was living with the uncertainty of not knowing who was behind the campaign or whether it was truly over. The phone calls had stopped once Lisa began working with cybersecurity professionals, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still being watched, still being studied, still having her reactions monitored and cataloged by invisible observers. Months later, Lisa received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a printed report, dozens of pages long, documenting every aspect of the psychological manipulation she had endured. The report was clinical and detailed, describing her responses to various stimuli and noting changes in her behavior patterns throughout the study period. It read like a scientific paper, complete with charts and graphs analyzing her psychological breakdown. On the last page was a single typed sentence: "Thank you for your participation in our research. Your data has been invaluable." Lisa never found out who had conducted the research or what they had done with the data they had collected about her psychological responses to manipulation and terror. The federal investigation into her case remained open but inactive, one of thousands of cybercrimes that were too sophisticated and resource-intensive to prosecute effectively. She moved to a different city, changed her name, and started over with new phone numbers and email addresses that Mike helped her secure with the highest levels of digital protection available. But she never fully recovered the sense of safety and control she had lost during those months of impossible phone calls. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Lisa wondered if the real horror wasn't the supernatural impossibility of receiving calls from her own number, but the very human reality of being reduced to a data point in someone else's experiment. The voice that had known tomorrow hadn't been prophetic. It had been created by people who understood that the future could be predicted and controlled if you had enough information and enough cruelty to use it against another human being. In the end, the most terrifying thing about hearing her own voice predict the future was learning that there was nothing supernatural about it at all. The real horror was discovering how easily a human life could be manipulated, monitored, and controlled by other humans who had the tools and the will to treat someone else's psychological destruction as an interesting research project. The voice that knew tomorrow had taught her that the future wasn't mysterious or magical. It was simply the inevitable result of people with power exercising that power over people without it. And that realization was more frightening than any ghost or demon could ever be.